Welcome to the Motivators Podcast, where heart meets innovation in ABA. I'm Emaley McCulloch, the Chief Clinical Officer at Motivity, and today we're diving into a future-forward conversation about where our field is headed. We're not doing a traditional interview this time. This is going to be a roundtable between leaders who live and breathe this work every day, from the clinical floor to the strategy table. I'm joined today by Smith Anderson, our CEO at Motivity, and Scott Dickson from abamission.com, a nationally recognized expert in autism care technology and operations. So a little bit about Scott. Scott has led initiatives across the ABA ecosystem, leader in ABA autism provider operations and technology. His work integrating AI, automation, and enterprise-grade systems has helped some of the largest ABA organizations scale smartly while maintaining quality. So today's topic, the future of ABA technology operations and clinical impact. From AI and advanced analytics to scalable systems and proactive clinical care, we're exploring how modern tools and mindsets are redefining what is meant to run a high-quality ABA practice. Okay, let's get into it. I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Scott and Smith. So, Smith and Scott, we've seen significant evolution in ABA technology, especially recently, moving beyond just basic data collection. So, I want to go around and give each of our vantage points. Clinician, operations, new technology CEO. How are you seeing technology fundamentally reshape the entire ABA ecosystem, from intake to scheduling to clinical delivery, billing, long-term outcomes? What are the biggest opportunities for providers to leverage these advancements today? So I'd like to begin and speak a little bit about the clinical workflows that I'm seeing. Gone are the days of using tech just to replace the binder, right? It's like no more like collect the data and review it in a week and then react. The modern tools are supporting dynamic treatment decisions, and BCBAs can pivot while the data rolls in. And supervisors now have access to dashboards that can give them insights into treatment fidelity and staff performance and caseloads. And it's making my clinical heart flutter to think about this. These fundamental shifts are less reactive and more proactive. So Smith, what are your thoughts about moving beyond data collection and maybe addressing also holistic business impact?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a bunch of them, but fundamentally what I think I see is that we're moving from just collecting data and tracking data, and we really need to be thinking about how we're leveraging that data, because it's going to change everything. It's already changed everything in terms of how we think about software, has changed the lives of just us as humans. When we look at ABA, we're looking at technology that allows us to unify the data collection, the billing, the outcomes, the scheduling, the people management, and it's something that we just can't think about doing on pen and paper anymore. It's not a luxury to have a solution that allows us to think about technology supporting ABA practitioners, the BTs, the BCBAs, the billers. It's something that we have to have. It's table stakes at this point. And it's not just about thinking about how we're focused just on better outcomes for the learners, but it's time savings for the back office. It's making sure that we have fewer missed appointments, where we have faster reimbursements, better employee retention. All of these things, when we think about how technology is improving ABA, is something that we're focused on at Motivity. We're thinking about, we have our roots in clinical data collection, and we spent a decade more making sure that we were thinking about all the ins and outs of how to make sure that we're collecting data in the right way, and we're supporting the practitioner and the BTs when they're in a session with a kiddo, and the BCBAs when they're setting up the treatment plans. But when you look at, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about how we think about AI, this connected ecosystem of both a practice management solution and a clinical data collection platform is the only path forward for practitioners when we think about where we are today. And it's a big part of the reason that there's so much funding that has gone into ABA, right? Because there is this huge need for advancements in being able to help practitioners just be better. And not necessarily better at treating the kids, because we know that there's a lot of history there and there's best practices, but making sure that as business owners, they're spending their time focused on the really hard work. So, I'm excited to get into more of the discussion, but, right now when I think about where we are, it's more than just the data collection, as you mentioned. It's thinking about the whole experience for our practitioners.
Right. Scott, what are some of your thoughts?
Well, first, thank you for having me, Emaley Smith. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I'll sort of start with you, Emaley. My perspective is not a clinician perspective. So I really have so much respect for you folks that are out there in the field really driving the therapy plans. When I talk about scale, it's really all around operations and administrative data. So when I talk, when Smith talks about, this fundamental shift to really being able to have access to like all of your practice management data as well as your EHR data, to me, that's the shift. That is what's really big that's happening in our space. And I'd go even beyond the idea that, just getting the practice management and EHR data is important. That's infinitely important. But when you can even start connecting that with things like payroll and your credentialing, and maybe even operationally into like a rewards platform for your staff or ticketing, I think you're giving yourselves the insight to really see what are your operational issues that, could be impacting your care, your stakeholders, and being able to act on them, and when you throw in AI, I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that later. The possibilities to me just are so exciting. I think we can do so much more to drive a better experience for everybody that's involved in the delivery of care and receiving care.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I've been excited to see, a lot of my friends are business owners, and the ability for them to be able to even just see the data and see the bottlenecks that are there that they never even knew that were happening, and that directly impact the quality of care, the access to care that our clients are getting. So, okay, let's continue. A persistent challenge in ABA is ensuring that operational efficiency directly enhances rather than compromises clinical quality. How can providers effectively bridge this gap? What are the key strategies for achieving true alignment between clinical excellence and scalable, profitable operations, particularly through the lens of technology and process optimization? Scott, let's start with what you think this time.
First of all, I get sometimes a sense there's this sort of like false tension behind, that exists between like a mission-driven approach and being operationally efficient. And I can tell you, I completely dispel that notion. I mean, my whole MO, I've been in autism about 7 years, but it's all been on the tech operations and data side. Now, I obviously work with, clinicians. I was at a, CIO at a big provider. And I've also, developed tech platforms for them. But when you can improve your operations, you are giving, in many cases, you're improving the lives of your clinicians. You're hopefully making scheduling and rescheduling a better process. Hopefully you're paying attention to your margins, and you can kind of see if you've got some room to negotiate with a payer on your reimbursement rates, and then, maybe give a little more to your clinicians as well. And you can also identify things like burnout. Is a clinician just are they canceling sessions themselves, or are they the victim of canceled sessions from a client? Are they just not converting their sessions, in their practice management platform? I mean, there's so much data that you can get and act on that I think ultimately is going to drive better care. Now, again, I'm not in the clinician side, but it just feels to me like if we give you a little more margin and some better operations and less grunt work to go do, it feels to me like that's a win. That's going to probably result in some better care.
Yeah. And Smith, I know you and I have talked about this a lot. Is there anything you'd like to add to?
Yeah, Scott, I couldn't agree with you more. I being somewhat new to the ABA space, I I feel that tension between really focus on the mission and talking about building profitable businesses or thinking about ways to drive more revenue. And it was curious, right? Because I do see in this relationship that one hand does feed the other, right? If you have a more successful business that's efficient and effective at driving not only sessions with kiddos that tend to lead to profitability, and you're efficient with your billables and you've done a good job of negotiating your rates, you have the opportunity to reinvest in that business and drive more capacity and invest in real estate to be able to bring on more BCBAs and techs. And of course, there's lots of conversation that we can have around burnout and making sure that employee health continues to stay high. But you really can't do that without resource, right? If you don't have money, it's really hard to do the things that you need to do to invest in a business. And it's really about growth, right? And sustainable growth. And I think to the nature of the conversation, Emaley, doesn't happen well when you aren't able to thoughtfully connect clinical excellence and operational excellence. They need to be aligned. Both parts of your business need to be operating at a very high capacity and level of excellence to be successful. You can be a great business person running a good clinic and have low clinical operational excellence or clinical excellence, and you're going to struggle. I think that you're going to struggle probably more with some of that BT burnout, BCBA burnout. So both of them need to be aligned. So what it means is that we need better data, which we started the conversation on. We need to understand what to do with that data, right? Just because collecting data in itself doesn't give us the answers. It's having the tools and the experience and the guidance to be able to make better decisions with that data. So I think in a world where we're talking about how do we think about clinicians and the seamless integration of platforms, like we're in an environment right now where we have access to so much data, but we don't always have the decision-making capabilities layered on top of that, right? The guidance that's going to be able to say, okay, excuse me, this is what we actually need to be focused on. Here's the important part of the business that needs to be worked on today. So, Scott, I'm 1,000% aligned there. And I think that given the nature of some of the things that we're working on here at Motivity and some of the discussion that we're going to have later in this conversation, we're really at an inflection point in the technology ecosystem that we're able to give some guidance to practitioners on decision-making in real time. And it's not just on the clinical side, but also on the business side, the operational side of the house.
Right. And, Smith, I've had the privilege of working in and working with organizations that have a really tight ship with the operational side of their business. And then also have had experience where the clinicians are kind of just like treading, like trying to keep their head above water. And what I see is when you have really clear workflows for operation, you have more resources to put into defining what clinical quality looks like. And then when you know what that looks like, then you can provide your staff more training. So technology is not always the solution to technology is amazing, but technology in combination with having operational excellence is what's going to bring you to that next level, because you need to be able to have a clear definition of clinical quality. Then you can create explicit, measurable clinical quality indicators, like what is treatment fidelity, what is caregiver satisfaction, and how are you going to measure those over time? And then it's almost like a chicken and egg thing. Once when you have operational efficiency, then can you have clinical excellence, or do you have clinical excellence and then you can have operational efficiency?
You got to figure out a way to work on both, right? Yeah. And I think Scott's shaking his head over there because maybe he agrees, but high quality care, which is what we're all after, requires high quality access to data and infrastructure to be able to support that.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about AI now. AI and advanced analytics are frequently discussed right now. I just came from a conference. It's all a buzz. Everyone's talking about it. But how are we moving from theoretical concepts to practical and impactful application within ABA operations? And where do you see the most realistic and ethical opportunities for leveraging the tech to solve complex business challenges? Smith, what are some of your thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts, but actually, I want to hear Scott first, just because I think that we may have similar ideas, but maybe come at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And it's happened. It's real. It's here. AI is here, and it's probably actually happened more so in your world, Emaley, on the clinical side. Quite frankly, than on the operations and admin side. And when I say that, what I mean is just the ability to sort of get a better handle on session notes. The creation of summary of session notes, even, some treatment plans. I've talked to some providers that are using it in that way. And it's, again, I'm no clinician, but to me, it's just fascinating how the noise level, like I heard 2 years ago about, the ethical dilemma about using AI for clinical delivery, seems to have subsided so much. I'm hearing so much more acceptance and embracing of that tech where it works. And to me, that's a good thing, right? If you're making an RBT or BCBA's job easier, holy cow, that's, they're the ones that are out in the front lines, right? So that's a good thing. So I'm already seeing it there, right? So I think that, it's happening. Unfortunately, I'm also seeing it a little bit in the RCM battles, revenue cycle between a payer and a provider, where at first, I worked at Optum for 10 years. So I'm a little familiar with, some of the payer dynamics. And they've embraced, like United Healthcare's embraced, AI to kind of review these claims over the last few years. And that's been made life very hard for many providers, who get their claims rejected. And now what's happened is that field has really leveled out a lot. Just in the last year, I've seen so many more providers using AI for the exact same purpose. So in a few ways, I almost feel like there's a detente between the two. That they're also kind of figuring out that, this is an arms race that doesn't help anybody, right? When you're using AI to basically, budget, manage the claims more tightly, unless you're doing it for clinical quality reasons in my book. So, that's probably not the best application, but I think the promise of AI, especially in the operations and administrative side, it's huge, but it's still not, it really hasn't been realized yet. And some of this gets back to my point on data. To really, be able to take advantage of things like agentic AI, you need to have an enterprise data set. You can train, do MLL on it. And if you don't have that, you're probably, you're going to default to something that's maybe not really AI. And even some of the tech vendors that claim they're AI are going into this space, a lot of them are just doing, rules-based approach, but there's nothing wrong with that. But I do see like a real push, for AI to help out hugely on the operational administrative side. Just think of all the people you have in, providers, client services group, with all the just busy work, administrative overhead. So much of that can, I think, really be made more efficient.
I 1,000% agree with you. And you hit on a couple of points that, and, no surprise, Scott, you and I had a conversation before we jumped on this podcast here, but, there's two things that I want to touch on. Number one is, I don't think that AI is going to come in and replace the humans. And I had a LinkedIn post last week about how human the ABA space is and the importance of the human, both on the practitioner side and what's behind the screen and the kids. And there's a human at every point along the journey for these kids through their process of treatment. And I don't know that AI is ever going to replace them. Now, it should augment them. It should amplify their ability to be successful in each one of those roles. But the second point that you started to touch on is like true AI is something that is truly generative and that is a learning agent on its own is incredibly difficult to build. It's incredibly expensive to build and maintain, and it requires a huge, accurate data set that is very specific around the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So on the clinical side, I think that there's no question about the problems that we believe that AI can help us solve from a clinical perspective, but getting access to a large enough, clean enough, you have access to it because of the sensitive nature of the data to be able to build these agents in an environment that is not only ethical, but is also without question cannot make mistakes. I think it's going to take a while. And we will get there. But one of the things that I do think that I want us to focus on is that on the operational side, that the value is immense It is just the ability for us to think about giving clinicians the ability to make real-time decisions on their business, I think is huge. Should we be spending more or less time on this aspect of our business? So AI supported scheduling, AI supported billing, AI supported financial reporting, all of the things that tend to be nuances and minutia of a business that take away from the clinician being in an environment where they're helping the kids, I think is where we can make an immense amount of improvement. Most of our customers are practitioners by trade, and now they are all of a sudden business owners. And that is the skill set that they are having to learn on the fly. And with some, to your point, maybe rule-based approached modeling or a static model behind the scenes, as we evolve into this truly AI space, I think we can make adjustments tomorrow. And session note summarization is maybe the first of something that's very small. It's a maintenance admin part of the job, but it's something that must be done. And can we do that with something that isn't necessarily required to spend hundreds of millions of dollars and terabytes of data to be able to learn? That's out of the box. And so this is where I think AI is actually going to, when we think of where we are, we're to use Emaley's language, we're in the first 5 seconds of the Big Bang. We're at this bottom of this massive mountain, but we're starting to be able to figure out how to climb faster. And the access to powerful computing capabilities that are cheaper, actual engineers that have the ability to build these AI capabilities into the platforms that are already supporting our industry, I think is just huge. So I'm excited. But without a question, there is going to be a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. There's going to be some flashy things. For us in our AI strategy, it's really focusing on what are the things that we need to be supporting to get the work done faster or more thoughtfully.
I really see that AI and machine learning and business, these analytics features are really going to help provide a lifeline to behavior analysts, because there's so many behavior analysts out there that are just really feel like they're drowning in the data, and they don't necessarily always know where to look to make the right decision for their clients. If you think about, let's say you have 8 to 12 cases, and most you're going to have about 10 to 20 goals that you're working on. That's going to be at least 15 graphs per learner that you're tracking, right? And that's hundreds, or at least over 100 graphs that you have to keep track of, and looking to make sure that goals are not plateauing, or they're not spiking, or they're not regressing. And if we have AI or machine learning that can alert us and flag these anomalies for us and say, hey there, you should look over here, and it looks like this learner needs some attention right now. I mean, that's just going to save us so much time of scrolling through and looking through. Also expanding upon that, we have so many new BCBAs in this field, but not enough supervisors. And so these new BCBAs are really struggling to kind of keep up with the literature, and they really need a hand-holding in the beginning, because once you pass that test, it's not like boom, you're everything. So if we have technology that can pull from the literature and provide some hey, it looks like this behavior plan isn't working, the behavior spiking, here's some suggested research articles to look at, or here's some other techniques you can use based on the literature, and this is going to support those behavior analysts in making future treatment decisions.
Let me ask you a question. Emily. One of the things that I've found interesting about where we are, we're leveraging an immense amount of technology in the space, and I think we still have a huge amount of headroom to grow in how we're going to be able to improve the practitioners, the business owners, the BTs. But one of the things that consistently seems to be a limiting factor is the number of kids that a BCBA can manage. How far away do you think we are from technology that can expand the capacity for BCBAs?
That's a great question. I really think that we also have to get stakeholders involved, because we have the BACB and the Council for Autism Service Providers really providing guidance on this. And they have published guidelines for BCBAs and the caseload recommendations that are based on our current system and our current like 1-tier versus 2-tiered supervision system. So right now it's between 5 to 15 clients, depending on the intensity of the treatment. Will technology be able to enhance that? I mean, that would be amazing because it would decrease the wait list time and decrease the access, or increase the access to care. But I think that's not really like our place as tech vendors to be placing that on the field. We should be collaborating with these organizations like CASP in presenting the data, or partnering with research organizations to do research on this type of question. But I think it's a really good question, and it would really help be able to provide more quality services to more children.
And what else have you seen, Scott?
Yeah, I would just throw in there that, again, completely non-clinician viewpoint, but I'm close enough to you guys in paying attention to what's happening, especially with some of the these platforms that are emerging in this space. I mean, phenotyping seems to me, as an outsider, like it could have that the potential to change the complete way that care is delivered, and more importantly, how outcomes are measured. And to me, wow, if there's a way to sort of leverage that in the delivery of care, I'm sure it's going to be somewhat of a more efficient, process than what happens today. It's going to be different for sure, hopefully more effective. But yeah, who knows? I mean, something like that, I think could just change the, dynamics completely in this space. How care is delivered, how it's paid for, how our stakeholders are engaged. It could be just fascinating.
Yeah, just a super unlock. And we know that we have partners and friends in the space that are working diligently on trying to figure out how to solve that problem and get buy-in, right? Like, solving the problem is one thing, but translating it into actual care is the next step. But what I will say without a doubt is that this industry is open, right? And looking for better ways to progress treatment. And so this could be that unlock moment.
All right. Next up is decision-making. With the healthcare landscape changing so fast, reactive management is no longer sustainable. So how can ABA organizations shift towards more proactive decision-making, using data technology to anticipate challenges, optimize resources, and drive strategic growth? What does enterprise decision support truly look like in action?
This is a big one. And, I think one thing is for sure is that you can't lead from looking in the rearview mirror. And in the way that we're thinking about enterprise level support, we're not necessarily just saying this is how it has always been done, so this is how we're going to do it in the future, especially because of how quickly this landscape is changing. We need to be looking at industries, adjacent industries, other tech industries that are a little bit further along, and take some guidance from them, and also continue to listen to our customers and understand, what is important to them and how we can support them at a much larger scale. We've talked a lot about operational excellence. I think as you think about the enterprise and decision-making at a much larger scale, having access to the right data, structuring the right data, and being able to look at an aggregated view of all of it in one place is where you start, right? And that's sort of the minimum, and that includes your employees, your learners, your staff, your payers, industry inputs. And I think Scott and I were briefly talking about this. The most parallel experience that I have as being part of a tech industry is using a tool like Salesforce or HubSpot. Mm-hmm. You're able to pull in the data that you own. You're able to pull in third-party data. You're able to be able to pull in market data. Some of it is subjective, some of it is objective, but it gives you access to this incredible, complete view of your business in real time, and it gives you the ability to make decisions. You can look backwards, and I'm not saying the rear view isn't important, but being able to see what you think is coming around the corner is only capable when you have access to enough of the data to make those decisions. And so I think that we're getting close to a point in ABA where we're going to give these practitioners access to that level of support and insight to be able to see what's coming around the corner. Are there employees at risk? Are there kiddos at risk? Are there locations that are at risk because they're not following an expected path towards progress? And progress being defined as something that, we can set benchmarks internally for them. Every practice is going to be a little bit different. But that's the way that I think about it. Like, we can no longer be reactive. We have to be proactive because of how quickly this landscape is changing. And it's not just things we can control. Obviously, we're in an immense amount of change as it relates to legislation and potential impacts on payers. And so that's something we need to keep an eye on as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'd love to build on Smith's comments, a little bit. So in the perspective I'll give is you have ecosystems like Salesforce that have just exploded and provided services and access to data. And when you think about ABA, you don't have that. I mean, you've got some large practice management vendors that haven't exposed their platform, they're starting to, some of these bigger players. But it's sort of created this, environment that's not really all that conducive to saying, hey, I'm going to connect all these services into my ecosystem, and I'm not going to get the data because it's hard to get it and integrate it with other systems and build out KPIs and operational dashboards and be able to really, act on them. So what I've seen is a lot of the bigger providers, especially the ones that aren't growing as fast as some of the others that are, haven't really invested into just on the tech side, the ability to kind of have somebody that's responsible for managing the data, getting the data out of these systems, building the dashboards on it, and understanding, quite frankly, like a data model that makes sense for ABA, because that's crossing both worlds, right? You've got clinical and administrative, and you're never probably going to find one person that can do both, but you've got to figure out how to build a competence kind of in each of those. And it's happening. I'm finally starting to see that, there is that move to really providers investing into data operations and data understanding so that they can build out those KPIs. A lot of it's being driven by their boards because they, expect to do a quarterly review, of a dashboard that has meaningful insights and how the business is performing. And of course, your clinical leaders want the same. They want to make sure that, the care they're delivering is the best, and, wherever they can track metrics there, they want to do that. So, but to me, I'm with Smith. I think maybe we're still a little further behind, but I kind of look at adjacent healthcare markets where you've got Epic and Cerner that have just tried to emulate what Salesforce is doing. And I feel like somebody's going to do that here, right? I don't know who. It might be you guys, but there's going to be somebody that makes that happen.
Well, certainly it's something that we aspire to achieve. And I don't disagree. We're not talking about apples to apples here in Salesforce and ABA software providers, but there is better access to data out there, and it will allow practitioners to be more successful. Rising tides raise all ships. And I think competition and access to data drives innovation. And so that's something that we're focused on. And we do have a certain number of challenges that exist in our space, whether we like it or not. And so we just have to make sure that we're thoughtful and work around those in the way that makes sense.
Yeah, Scott, you provide some articles at ABA Mission that are really insightful in terms of technology and like where we're going in this space. My question for you is, you've seen a lot of tech vendor like come and go, and there's some new ones coming into this space. What do you think are some of the key characteristics of a tech vendor in the ABA space that's going to make them be lasting and be able to stick around and provide that that long-term value to ABA companies?
Yeah. So you're referring to my website, missionviewpoint.com. That's my plug. That's the only one I'll give for it. And thanks for reading it. But yeah, what I really see is that, there's this, I've seen sort of a shakeout of, I'd call categories of tech vendors. I even blogged on it this weekend, where I'm seeing, some of the legacy players, the Central Reaches, Rethink, Aloha's, and Sora. And I'm seeing what I'm calling kind of you guys, which is, kind of the tech forward, big investments the last, year or so. that are really, going after the space. Then you've got this whole, like, they're calling themselves sort of clinician first model, which is less about the tech and more about providing a service. And I look at all three of those, and to me, the only thing I really care about, professionally right now, is I want to drive scale in this space that gives more kids access to care. I kind of, at that point, that's the only thing I care about. And I'm kind of agnostic to your model as long as I think it works to drive scale. But when you're talking about scale, you got to talk about the big players, right? I mean, that's literally, where the scale, appears to be. So I think the vendors that are lasting are going to be the ones that you figure out how to scale the biggest, scale the fastest. And to do that, it feels to me like, yeah, you've got to have open APIs. You've got to have good a partner platform, things you could integrate with. You got to be able to share your data, right? And provide some thought leadership, in this space as to, what really will work best. So, and I'm certain that the landscape today, even in a couple of years, is going to look dramatically different from right now. There's a lot of money going into the technology side of this space. Not so much going into the providers as there was a few years ago. And I almost feel like there's a little bit of a rebalancing that's probably going to happen on both sides.
For sure. In general, I think we are in a space right now where we should expect continued consolidation. And that is for sure going to happen on the technology side. But to your point, probably will continue to happen on the practitioner side. Payer pressure is something that is just a constant, but it will evolve probably over the next 6 to 36 months in a way that, it's hard to know exactly where we're going to end up. And then the consistent workforce dynamic pressure, which is, do we have enough people to support the number of kids that need support in a way that is manageable? And so to your point, Scott, I think we need to invest in systems and data today that will allow us in 3 to 5 years to be a completely different ecosystem. We're going to continue to see a rise in M&A, and maybe that's more, single platforms like a data collection and a practice management consolidating together, or we're going to see some of these companies that are probably more features being scooped up by the bigger platforms to create a more thoughtful, holistic solution. But I think that everything that we talked about earlier in the discussion today is paramount for us to be thinking about. Do we have access to the right people? Are we building the right culture? Do we have the right data to make decisions? Are we thinking about the investment that Motivity just got from Five Elms as growth capital, or just a way to put, a new billboard on the front of the house? And for sure, we're thinking about from the former. We want to invest in systems and technology and people that allow us to scale the business and be prepared to support our existing customer base, which is mostly sole practitioners, but also allow us to continue to expand into the enterprise sector because we know that there's going to be growth there. And scale, I think, is just the one word that we need to continue to think about in every decision that we make, is that in addition to all the other things we talked about, making sure that we're focused on good clinical outcomes, thoughtful data-informed decision-making, but the ability to scale our team, our systems, our technology, and our customers' ability to support the kiddos in the best way possible. But the future doesn't exist without scale. There's no industry in software, or even to a certain extent, brick and mortar, that can survive without the ability to scale.
Okay, one more topic to go. Looking ahead, what are the most significant trends, challenges, and opportunities that will shape the ABA provider landscape over the next 3 to 5 years? What should leaders be prioritizing today in terms of technology, operational strategy, and clinical innovation to ensure their practices are not just surviving, but thriving in the future? All right, let's start with you, Scott.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of a curveball answer to this, because it's in my mind, what's missing most in this space that's really inhibiting scale is it's sort of a recognized understanding, an agreement from providers, from payers, from parents, everybody on what is a clinical outcome. Like, how do you measure that in a way that everybody agrees to, that now you're not having to, as a provider, to negotiate, a different contract or plan with every Medicaid provider, across the country, and as well with your commercial plans. I've heard things like, parent satisfaction sort of floated as one that really is a good measure, but I'm not sure it's all that clinical, right? And again, I'm not a clinician, but it feels to me like if the folks on the clinical side need data, us techies, we're going to be able to find it for you. But I just feel like we can't really, do the advocacy to get everybody aligned with what's an effective outcome. And until that happens, it just feels like truly scaling this business is a really tough thing to do.
Yeah, I think that you're bringing up the elephant in the room in terms of the clinical space, and all of the ABA providers know that this is here. What I think is the challenge is that if you get all of these amazing clinical minds in one room, there's just going to be so many different takes on how to define clinical outcomes. Because I think number one thing is the spectrum is a very wide spectrum, and there's no clear assessment that is out there that is going to accurately capture progress as that every learner on the spectrum is going to go through. And I think that we did talk about a little bit about client satisfaction, but if we look at what's happening in adjacent fields, we look at behavioral health, we look at IDD, we know value-based care is coming. It's coming down the pipeline to us, and that we need to have something ready to go. And if you look at behavioral health, it's a combination of different factors. Yes, it's client satisfaction. So we do, as a field, we're not really good at capturing this data. We have this term called social validity, but it's not accessible. People don't know what social validity is. We need to start relying on tools that are being used in adjacent fields for client satisfaction, and these is caregiver satisfaction, and also capturing even the learners on the spectrum. How do we track their satisfaction with the services they're receiving? But then you also have, okay, how much progress are they making? And you look at standardized assessments like the Vineland that's being adopted. In most cases, it's really just not. It's just not sensitive enough to be able to compare across the population. And then if you start looking at number of goals mastered, right? You can't really compare. They're apples and oranges. One goal is going to be very different from another goal in terms of the intensity and the capacity is to meet them. What I think we really need to do as a field is we need to partner with each other and also the tech vendors that are going to be tracking this and reporting it, to start standardizing what's in the systems so that we're tracking things that are the same. Like, what is a goal? What's a long-term goal? What's a short-term goal? How can those be compared? Same with the ability to track opportunities. How many learning opportunities are we presenting to our clients within a time period? How effective are we in our treatment sessions? What is our treatment efficiency? And if we can get some, I really think if we could get some larger organizations that have the resources and the research teams to come together and to start to define these key aspects of how we're going to come forward to our payer systems when they come to us, they're like, we want to do the value-based care. I think that's where we need to go as a field. And Motivity, like vendors like Motivity, we're really excited to also be a part of it, because we're going to be the ones that are presenting the data and providing the insights there.
Yeah, I think it's a really challenging, it's a challenging problem to solve, clearly. But I think that the fact that we are working with such a wide spectrum of challenges with these kiddos, it makes it hard to say this is the standard process, right? But I do have a lot of confidence that our ability to collect, store, structure, and analyze large data sets over a long period of time is going to give us some of those insights on the ways that we should be thinking about potentially creating some of these standardizations. But to Emily's point, I think it goes beyond Motivity, right? And just our customer base. It's really got to be an industry-led decision that we're going to create more of an open source environment where we have access to data that's going to allow us to create some of the standardizations. Certainly a 3 to 5 year plan. To comment, Emily, on generally from a business perspective, where I think the space is going in the next little bit, and to use Scott's word, scale, that's for sure going to continue to be a constant, along with consolidation, which we've already seen. We're a part of that, but I suspect that it's going to accelerate over the next 18 to 24 months, where we'll see more single-use platforms joining forces to create more of a unified experience, as well as some of these companies that have more of a feature focus that likely will be part of an acquisition or a consolidation. We've seen it in the last 12 months. And I expect that's going to continue to be the case. And that's not even necessarily new in ABA or in tech. Payer pressure, which we know is going to change over the next 6 to 36 months. And to the extent that we have visibility around what that's going to look like, we got to keep an eye on it. And then the workforce dynamics, the challenges that we continue to see in burnout and access to the level of support that these businesses need as we think about the industry and the scale that is required. So the decisions that need to be made today. A lot of the things that we talked about earlier in this podcast, investing in systems, data access, company culture, leadership culture, really thinking about building the infrastructure today for the organization of tomorrow. And that means being able to support a sole practitioner in their business as a small business owner, helping them make decisions on not only the clinical side of the business, but the operational side of the business, as well as the ability to support an organization that is already at scale or is scaling. So can we think about administrative dashboards, BI dashboards, tooling that allows them to see what's going across their entire organization, similar to the Salesforce example that we used. We're building practices, or we're building a software today to support practices of tomorrow. And some of them already exist, but I think that as we think about how technology has impacted the way that we run our business, as well as the way that we're supporting the businesses, our customers today, it's changing so quickly that we need to start making investments today that won't pay off for 18 months or longer related to the AI conversation. But generally, this is why we're seeing such an investment come into the ABA space, is because there is, without a doubt, clear signals in the road that we're going to continue to see consolidation, that we'll continue to see investment, and that the organizations that are going to win, to Scott's point, are going to have the ability to pull in disparate data sets, access that data, support it, analyze it, and give feedback to the users. So in that moment, they can make better decisions. So for me to consolidate, what I think the next 3 to 5 years is, in one word, is scale.
What are some of your thoughts around what we as a field can do to make some progress in this area of outcomes?
You want me to go first, or is that for Scott?
Go ahead, Scott.
I'm not sure I have a good answer. Like it feels to me it's so clinical in nature. I mean, it's, I'm completely out of my element if I'm commenting on like, what's the best form of care and how do you measure it? Again, the things that I can do is, if you tell me what to collect, I can advocate for that, right? We can make sure, I'm going to work with the, tech platforms like you guys and the providers, to make sure that there's a common understanding of what those things should be. And that people are consistently, kind of tracking those. So I just don't know, Emily. It's a tough question. I mean, I feel like that's why it hasn't been solved yet. I know this is a relatively new field, especially if you're a payer, and sort of looking at it. It's very difficult. This is probably the most challenging, medical vertical I've seen. You've got so many different stakeholders, And it's so subjective, whatever you do. So I don't really have a good answer other than to say, lead me, right? And we'll help you kind of find the right, data to pull in to give to you to, guide those discussions.
Yeah. And we are fortunate that we have some organizations, stakeholders that are working, like CAST just published recently some guidelines on outcomes, and that I think is probably the most impressive multi-stakeholder article that was published recently on that. So that gives me a lot of hope that we are moving forward together in some way. But you're exactly right. Like, we're not going to be able to scale without those outcomes being defined and us all being on the same page, and tech vendors being able to present and display that data.
We're ready. We're going to go solve it.
Yeah, we're really excited. All right. That was a really fantastic conversation. That's a wrap for episode of the Motivators Podcast. Huge thanks to Scott Dickson, and thank you, Smith Anderson, for your insight, candor, and future-facing ideas. If you're a leader in the ABA space looking to deliver better outcomes, empower your team, and build a practice that thrives, not just today, but for years to come, this conversation was for you. And to learn more about how Motivity is helping practices transform their operations with real-time insight, flexible tools, and real human support, you can visit us at motivity.net, and you can join one of our upcoming webinars or schedule an in-person demo with one of our really friendly staff members. And to hear more from Scott, please check out abamission.com.
Or missionviewpoint.com with some in-depth articles. Thank you, Emaley.
Oh, say that again, Scott?
Missionviewpoint.com.
Missionviewpoint.com.
Yeah.
And his articles are really insightful. I learned a lot from reading them. So go check those out. And thanks again for joining us. And we'll see you next time at the Motivators Podcast.